All right. Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm here to talk to you about expanding the Learning Laboratory on the East Campus, which is the hillside that's not too far away from where we're sitting on this side of the university. It was a project that was started back in 2009 when President Rose gave a talk, at least the part that I know about was he gave a talk that wanted to integrate more environmentally friendly activities on campus, and they hired an outside consultant, and we started what became a meadow on the East Campus hillside. This is the meadow in 2013. We're clearing out some of the invasives that had gone into it in this particular activity, but you can see that one of the things that happened was we got something that looks a little bit different than grass. And this has enabled our students to take advantage of that particular area for a lot of educational opportunities that we would otherwise have to go off campus to get. We started, of course, as a university in 1908, but this is a picture from the 1940s with the university down at the bottom. And the East Campus hillside would actually be right in this area here. And you can see that this was pasture land and hay land. This is where we are right now, would be up in this area. Down in this area would be UREC, places like that. And we, of course, have I-81 in between. So there's quite a lot that's happened since 1940. But one of the things that has happened is we built our building. And then we started to think about how we could better use the landscaping, especially the grass on the east side of the campus. So the first thing that we did was put in the meadow, which, though the initiative started in 2009, the actual installation began in 2011. It was a few years after that the perennials started to dominate. The picture that's on the right there, it's just the cover crops that came in first. We're going to go through this same process soon, we hope. After 2013, classrooms started going out and using the hillside for a variety of different things. I sat in geography were the primary ones, but there are other courses that use the hillside now. In 2018, partly as a result of Madison Trust, we added a raised bed garden in the area. I'll explain why it's a raised bed in just a minute. And then added pollinator beds in 2019. Didn't get very far with that because COVID hit, then not too long after that, and slowed us down a bit. But even with that, in 2021, we added a food forest. So we've done a lot of expansion in the area. And also, right now, if you go look, there's flags on the hillside where they've taken out a little bit of the meadow, and they're going to add a 300 kilowatt solar panel array on the hillside. This is the area where it's all happening. The original meadow is up here. There's 4 units of it. The original solar panels are up along the Carrier Drive just before it goes across I-81. And we added the garden in 2018. This little line here, which I didn't really know showed up in a Google Earth image, but it did, is actually the cable that supplies a lot of the East Campus's connections to the internet, among other things. And so we couldn't dig there, and that's why we had to put raised bed gardens down at the bottom. Just above there, we're going to put in, they are there now actually, some pollinator beds, but we need to improve them and expand them. Started that in 2019. The food forest went in this little section here just this past fall. And we added some beehives in 2019. And they are, one hive anyway, is active right now, and we're working on improving that. And then the main focus then the expanded solar, is going up there at the top. And the main focus of today's effort is the proposed meadow, which we want to put in this year. Part of the reason for the proposed meadow is to take the losses that we're getting from the expanded solar panels and put it in there. But the solar panels are not a complete loss because facilities management is going to put in a short grass prairie type plantings underneath it, so it will still have a lot of species that can be used by pollinators, but it'll be under the solar panels or between the solar panels. So this is the area, looking at it again. The proposed meadow expansion is going to go right in this triangle area back here. The food forest is actually now located right in this area, and these students and faculty are working on the pollinator beds. This picture was taken in the spring of 2019. This is the raised bed garden as it was in 2018. We've actually got 6 of these beds now. There's just 2 in this particular photograph. This was in the fall, not too long after they were first set up. One of the things we're after in this entire thing, of course, is a place where students can go to learn. And some of the activities that we've been doing on the hillside, includes my colleagues in the geography program, is go out and document what animals have moved in, because we've got so many new different species of plants. And so they're documenting butterflies and other critters like that have come in. And one of the more exciting things that happened in the last year is my colleague that has done this came up to me very excited, I think it was in September, because they just documented their 26th new species coming into the Hillside Meadow area. And they keep expanding. That's just of the butterflies. Over the course of the last 7 years, when we've been using this, we've also been documenting exactly how it's been used. And the Institute for Stewardship of the Natural World has actually coordinated all the data from the use of it, and we're close to publishing a paper on that with myself and 7 other colleagues. The lead author is actually in the Institute. And we've seen over 3,000 students directly using the hillside for classrooms. This does not include people just casually visiting. This is actually out in labs actively using the area. Fundamental of Environmental Science, which is a class that I teach, has a lab that goes every year on this, usually 40 to 50 students that test soils and things like that. The biogeography courses use this for both plant and animal labs for their work, and the butterfly picture was from them. We also have senior capstone projects in both geography and in ISAT program, and those capstone students use this area for some of their activities for research, doing lab work combined with field work right on campus. General education courses also include this, so if we added the general education numbers, the numbers would spike quite a bit, but every year general education classes go and just tour the area, and that often provides students for later classes that go use the area for labs. And then life and environmental science for teachers also is using the living laboratory, and in some cases this has now connected with those teachers going out and using this kind of model in their own primary and secondary schools. So we're starting to see some add-ons to this project where people can go beyond and start using it elsewhere. And then other departments are getting more and more involved all the time. We don't have the documentation on this quite as much, but biology and geography, our geology are also using it, and other places on campus as well. People get excited about finding new species. This is called a brown-belted bumblebee. This was the best picture of a bumblebee that I could come up with in this. One of the more exciting findings was a rusty patch bumblebee, which is actually on the endangered species list. Unfortunately, the picture of it was taken with a cell phone, and it doesn't have the quality to go up on the screen. But that's exciting to see, because the part of the reason for the extinction of a lot of bumblebees is the lack of diverse biotic community that we're trying to restore in this kind of setting. And we're also trying to restore the tree canopy too. And so one of my colleagues, Michaela Schmidt-Harsh, who's working on this committee, is shown here walking across the front, but we planted a number of fruit trees. There were 90 trees planted last fall with students. And one of the activities we're going to look at doing is planting pollinator species in the rows of the trees. So they'll be the understory in the tree crop. We've also gotten really excellent cooperation from a lot of different people on campus, among students and staff as well as faculty, and that has really helped. In this particular picture, you're actually seeing students from 4 different colleges that came out to volunteer on the day we planted the fruit trees, as well as a couple of people from facilities management. So, our present need is to look specifically at where we would like to expand the Meadow area, because we're losing a little bit and we want to expand. Facilities has provided us this area, but we don't have the funding available for it. So one of our goals is to install the new Meadow area with a set of species that we have identified that are more appropriate. In some cases, the species that we had in the first round of meadow planting in the successional process has led to a lot of grasses. But grasses aren't good at attracting pollinators. So what we're trying to do is then pick a new set of species that will lead to a more diverse flowering set of plants that will last the entire season. We're also trying to reconstitute the pollinator beds so that people can have access to places where these species are identified. Instead of just in a wild meadow, it's in a place where they actually will have labeled plants in a raised bed that the students will then know how to identify them in other locations. And in the same time, we want to provide access to those for students who are disabled and get that straightened out. So we'll add some pathways from the existing sidewalks that they'll access from below the meadow area, or not above because you have to go downstairs that way, but from below you can access it, and then pathways that go off the existing sidewalks over to these spots so they can participate as well. We'll need a few additional tools for that, for about $500, probably some electric string trimmers and hedge trimmers and those kinds of things that will help us with the process. And then a little bit of work to get the beehives reconstituted. One of the things that happened with them is the COVID outbreak sort of eliminated the transition between the beekeeping committee of the students. It was a bee-involved student club, and they couldn't transition because of COVID. So we are reconstituting it. There's about 6 students involved already. They're getting the club up and running, but they need a little bit of money to get it kick-started and get the second hive back in shape. And so we put that in as well. At that, I will stop and ask for questions, and thank you for your attention and time. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Part of the need for this project is come as a result of a third of the meadow being displaced for the solar panels. So if you look at all the planning that's gone on and the work with various parts of the campus, has that included work with long-range planning to ensure that there won't be further encroachment, necessary encroachment by the solar panels, but for the project and things you're putting in? I'm encouraged you're putting in trees because those are things that are a little more difficult to move.
Yeah.
But I'm not suggesting anything negative about this, but just to what extent have you looked at long-range planning where there may be also other needs for that same space to ensure that whatever improvements you make here will continue into the future?
Yeah, most of that is being done through the Institute for Stewardship of the Natural World, and they have coordinated with facilities management on a lot of the planning activities with this. Sometimes things surprise us.
Sure. That's
just the nature of how things work. But right now, I think the spirit of cooperation between facilities and long-term planning at the president's office and then through the provost's office is a bit better, and we're thinking about that. But right now, they're pretty committed to having this work because they've seen that student involvement is really what drives this particular program. And if you see this as a lab, not just as a lawn, it starts to look a lot better for the long term for that.
Thank you.
Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. What specific roles do you envision the students playing in the project, and how many students would you expect to be involved?
Well, just like the fruit tree planting that you saw, we had about 60 come out. At least that was on the list. They weren't there the entire time. Sometimes they have classes and other things, so you get some interchange. But we try to involve students at every stage in this particular project. So whenever there's a building activity that goes on, like constructing the raised beds, or some invasive species removal, there's a class that actually every fall goes out and they go out and study the invasive species and then remove some of them so that we can keep those kinds of things out of the meadow. Every activity that we do, we are trying to consider how we can involve students in the process. And so that enables us to expand the nature of the labs that we've got. And so we just simply incorporate that into the process. And so the whole goal of this is to make sure we maximize student involvement. I would like to see it double in the next 3 years if we can. And I think this will help with that process.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you again. Pollinators are obviously critical to our food supply, and you said you're learning lessons about the right plants that are more sustainable, and you have a paper coming out. Are you developing best practices for establishing environment for pollinators and sharing that across, or is that something coming down the road?
It's both and in a lot of ways. We have been learning a lot, and as we learn, it gets incorporated into the teaching materials. And so that's coming. But we're also looking to have students do some experiments on what really are best practices, because a lot of this is relatively new, and every planting system that you have has to depend on the interaction between the soil ecology and the surrounding natural ecology that we've got. And so through time, we're actually seeing changes in part because the landscape's improving. And so it allows us to plant other species that might not have been as appropriate at the beginning. So, kind of a long answer, but the short answer is, yeah, we want to maximize this effectiveness. And so we're trying to basically catalog or write down every observation that we make so that we can make the next round better through time. Yeah. Other questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How are you going to coordinate with the facilities department? Because
Well-
at some point, if they fertilize or they do other things and it gets over into your meadow, it affects the studies and so forth.
Yeah,
What do you do to coordinate?
It does, and that-
What's their delineation of work?
Yeah, that's a real good question, and we had some difficulties through time, in part because sometimes you have to train the people that mow the lawn so they don't creep into the meadow area, and so that has happened, but we have really good connections with facilities, and the key thing to that whole thing is communications. Abe Kaufman is our main contact person in the facilities management, and he's out there with us when we're doing stuff, along with a couple of other people on his team, and then they take over the education of that on their side. Our lab coordinator in the environment team in the ISAT is going to have some of his time, thanks to the dean among other people, devoted to maintaining the living laboratory. So he will coordinate with Abe and the facilities people to make sure things are done correctly. But we've had to think about that because if you don't have good communication, it won't work.
We've also been working with the Director of Facilities Management and to ensure that she's committed, and she's very much so. In fact, she's now moved up the chain, and she's the Interim Vice President for Administration and Finance, and she was extremely supportive about both the food forest and this new project. So it feels like those lines of communication are strong right now.
Oh yeah. Tawana Moore, who's the person, is actually one of the first people who learned about just putting in the first meadow. And so she's been involved with it from the very beginning. And so we feel like the lines of communication are excellent at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there like a more of a end goal or vision of like how this will become and complete exhibition of everything that we can possibly put into this, continue and expand, or is this something that's kind of like, okay, yeah, we're getting involvement, so we're just kind of spending. So I'm just curious, like, what's the kind of like your end vision of this, I guess, the complete project to be at in the longer term?
Yeah, we talk about it among ourselves frequently, and one of the goals, of course, is to have a really healthy ecosystem, and so students can see what that looks like. And so we monitor changes through time to see how we're reaching that goal. We're not there yet. These take a long time, and it takes a whole successional process and understanding of that ecology. But sometimes the process of meeting a goal is the educational goal that you want. And so we're trying to reach a much healthier ecosystem, but certainly to teach our students as that happens.
So this is the unfun part of my job. I have to be the time warden in this. So thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome. Thank you.